Almighty God, we humbly beseech thee to vouchsafe thy blessing upon this council. Direct and prosper its deliberation for the advancement of thy glory and the true welfare of the people of the Whittlesea City Council. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the state government directives around working from home, this council meeting is being held entirely online via live stream. The meeting is being conducted in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act 2020 and the Minister for Local Government's Good Practice Guideline, MGPG1, for virtual meetings. If at any stage during the meeting a technical issue prevents all administrators from participating in the live stream, the meeting will be adjourned until the matter is resolved. I now pass over to the Chair of Administrators, Lydia Wilson.
Thank you. On behalf of the City of Whittlesea, I recognise the rich Aboriginal heritage of this country and acknowledge the Wurundjeri Willem clan as the traditional owners of this place. I would also like to personally acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. I note all administrators are present. Administrators, if you have a conflict of interest in any item on the notice paper, you may verbally disclose the type and nature of the interest now, but you must make a declaration immediately before consideration of the matter in question. Administrators, are there any items for which you have a conflict of interest to declare?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Administrators, I seek a motion to confirm the minutes of the adjourned special meeting of Council, which was held on the 7th of July 2020, and also the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 7th of July 2020. Could I have a mover?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. And a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. I'll now put the matter to a vote. All those in favour of confirming the minutes? Motion carried. Manager Governance, are there any questions from the public?
No, Chair, there's no questions.
Thank you. I note we have one petition and two joint letters. Firstly, we have a petition relating to street trees in Samuel Court, Bandura.
Chair, may I have the call, please?
Thank you, Administrator Bilson.
Chair, we have a petition from 15 residents requesting Council remove the nature strips along Samuel Court in Bandura. I move, Chair, that the petition be received and referred to Council officers to contact the head petitioner along with all other residents in the street, seeking their input on the street trees along Samuel Court, Bandura, and for a report to be provided to Council.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. I'll put that to the vote. Motion carried. We also have a joint letter regarding street trees in Flaxen Hills Road, Doreen.
I'll move that, Chair. Chair, I have a petition from 59 residents requesting Council remove the nature strip trees along Samuel Court, Bandura. I move that the petition be received and referred to the officers to contact the head petitioner along with all residents within the street, seeking their input on the trees along Flaxen Hills Road, Doreen, and provide a report back to Council.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan, and I do note that it is a joint letter, not a petition. Is there a seconder?
Yes, Chair, happy to be seconder.
Thank you. I'll put that to the vote. Motion carried. We have a second joint letter, which is from 11 residents of Campus Place, Thomastown, requesting reconsideration of the choice of street tree. I will move that the joint letter be received and referred to officers to contact the signatories and provide a report back to council. Is there a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. I'll put that to the vote. Motion carried. Administrators, I note our procedural matters local law doesn't easily provide flexibility for administrators to speak to matters if there's no opposition, and hence I move that we suspend standing orders to provide all administrators with an opportunity to speak to matters in the notice paper if they wish, without the need to indicate opposition for the purpose of debate and for other purposes. Can I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair. Happy to second that.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. I'll put that motion to a vote. Motion carried. Administrators will now work through the agenda. I would like to move an item of urgent business to enable the Council to receive a report regarding the impact of COVID-19 on our community. Could I have a seconder to admit the item as urgent business?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. I'll put that motion to a vote. All those in favour? Motion carried. I'd now like to ask the Acting CEO to provide an update to both the Council and to our community on the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on our community. Thank you, Acting CEO.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, administrators. Chair, as was declared by the Premier, the state of emergency that was first announced on the 16th of March has now been upgraded to a state of disaster, which came into effect on Sunday evening of the 2nd of August. This does place the City of Whittlesea, along with the Metro Melbourne councils, into further restrictions at the level of stage 4. These further restrictions are designed, of course, to reduce the volume of public movement and physical contact as the primary measure of slowing down the spread of the coronavirus. But with such restrictions, of course, the face even of our retail and industry will significantly change as they both either close their doors and or limit their operations. At the beginning of July, Chair, just prior to entering the then stage 3, re-entering the stage 3 restrictions, the City of Whittlesea had 21 active COVID-19 cases. And as at last night, this number has now grown to 452. So it gives a fair dimension of the growth and the speed at which the virus is taking hold. But significantly, these numbers include those major outbreaks that were reported, namely amongst our dear friends at Aged Care Services and the Epping Gardens Aged Care that reached a caseload of confirmed cases of 130. Also, on the industrial side, Bertocchi Small Goods has been reported as having, in Thomastown, as having up to now 148 cases involved in that outbreak. We feel very much for the individuals and their families, and indeed for the community in its entirety at this difficult point in time. The impacts for our community have been widespread, and if I were just to mention some of the job losses in our city, we have noted from data available to us for the June 2020 quarter that some 4,900 local jobs have been lost across the city. But this is a number that would have been greater, would have been closer to 8,300 or so, if not for the federal government JobKeeper subsidy that has come into play. But that is an area to watch going forward in terms of the impact on employment amongst our residents. Another telling piece of data is the number of our residents that are on job seeker or job allowances. And this figure has more than doubled since the same time last year in June 2020, where it was travelling at 4.1%. Now we've reached just under 10% at 9.8% in this category. Some of our suburbs across the city are now reporting unemployment rates of anywhere between 12.7 and 13.1%. And unfortunately, many of these job losses have been felt in the hardest affected industries of hospitality, retail and tourism. But also we note the education and training sector has lost some 700 jobs over the same period. But these factors are clearly showing out in the volume increases in the range of supports that are being requested for emergency relief across our city. So many of our agencies that work closely with council are reporting greater numbers of emergency relief for food provision, for provision of blankets and clothing, and other necessities that are going to make life a little bit easier for those that are calling out for help. But there is a growth and there is a need that is really in the response phase still of this pandemic. Collectively, just to give an example, the average number of food hampers that are being distributed across the city by our various network of agencies is somewhere around the 320 mark. Pre-COVID, this was 80. So it's a fourfold increase, just to give some measure. As far as council services have been going, we have maintained all of our essential services in accordance with the state guidelines and operated those within the extra precautions for the pandemic. But some 45 local service providers have received direct financial support from council in those areas of emergency relief to a total of some $200,000 to date. But I suggest to you, administrators, that this is the relief and response period in which we are in will now have an extent about it, and we will need to come back to council with some reserve funding for this area of continuity, notwithstanding that we have announced a COVID recovery budget of some $2 million to be played out in 2021. But a key focus for our organisation is continuing to redeploy staff in those areas of community-facing services that need our support, but also to pay close attention to what we can do for the community and our business sector in complementing the state and federal government approaches and stimulus that are now rolling out. Unfortunately, this is the impact of COVID has also hit our own organisation, so far in a small way, but still a concerning way. One of our staff members who has been working entirely remotely has had a family transmission of COVID-19. So, and of course is under care and under quarantine, and our feelings extend to her and her family. We also have had an in-house case at our Epping depot of one worker who had come into contact with a contractor who, unbeknownst to them at the time, was later confirmed as a COVID case. So relevant quarantining, tracing of all staff that have had contact with our confirmed case have been undertaken, and all measures of sterilisation and cleansing have been gone through. We did have, as a result, disruption of 2 days of service around line marking, street sweeping, and other services that would have normally been held on Friday and Saturday from our depot operations. So it is a serious time, administrators, and it is one where council needs to play a vital role in supporting its community, but also in looking at ways we can complement the other levers of government and what they are attempting to do in their aspirations to support our city, but our state at this particular time. Thank you, Administrator.
Thank you, Acting CEO, for that very comprehensive report. Administrators, do you have any questions of the Acting CEO? Administrator Bilson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the Acting Chief Executive. Acting Chief Executive, you would have seen the aged care area being a particular area of focus and concern. I'm interested in whether what we're seeing in residential aged care has had implications for community aged care services provided through the council, and also about our own biosecurity protocols for our own staff, but also the clients that they're working with through home care.
Thank you very much, Administrator Bilson, for the question. And just to give context, the City of Whittlesea has some 82 home support worker staff in our contingent of staff. And collectively, we look after about 1,990 clients, just under 2,000. This has dropped over the last 2 months due to some families taking over the care of their loved ones now that they have that disposition and ability to do so. But nevertheless, we've followed very strict Commonwealth health guidelines in this area around biosecurity. So all staff have had retraining in universal infection control. That is reinforced through repeated supervisor contacts with all of our 82 staff. PPE is in full spread, so that is including masks, overshoes, aprons, gloves and face shields, and they are deployed on a basis of need, depending on the type of service that is being offered to the type of clients. But as a proactive measure, we are not attending to any of our clients without first a triage phone call going ahead into the family and to the client to both roll call, if you like, their condition and whether there are any changes in their circumstances prior to us engaging in direct primary care service delivery. But as you may imagine and you may appreciate, administrators, our own staff are experiencing some levels of anxiety about balancing their own obligations to their clients, but also to their own families. And we are offering very direct support from a social support point of view to our own staff. We have also surveyed under the risk of this environment whether any of our 82 staff actually work for any other service or agency or nursing home service. The report is that we have nil that work in any other service. Prior to we also at times use casual employees that are deployed to us, where we have frozen that because that is an area where we may be using staff that are working at multiple agencies. So I think from a biosecurity standpoint and a procedural standpoint, we are doing the most we can to both protect our staff and our client domain and working closely with their families to understand the nature of any change in conditions. Administrator Wilson.
Thank you, Chief Executive.
Thank you. Did you have any further questions, Administrator Bilson? Acting CEO, I do have a further question. You made reference when you were reporting on this issue in relation to the $2 million COVID recovery fund, which we approved through our budget deliberations. I wonder if you could give us an update on the status of that particular fund, given, as you indicated, we're not currently in the recovery phase, we are still actually within the response phase.
Thank you, Chair. And as you rightly point out, the $2 million COVID recovery fund was exactly that. It was to work in partnership with our businesses and our community agencies and residents to work out the best way and plan the best way for its use in the recovery modality. And planning was well underway to commence those sorts of engagements with our community. However, this has virtually been interrupted by the stage 4 that we have now entered into, and the fact that of a state of disaster that has been declared is still a response state. So we are now putting together, Chair, the pieces to extend our financial deployment in the response phase, and we will be coming shortly to Council with a package of initiatives and necessary supports to extend that package forward. So we look forward to coming back to you, administrators.
Thank you, Acting CEO. this will obviously be an ongoing issue for council deliberations. Are there any further questions of the acting CEO? No? I would like to actually move that the report of the acting CEO be received. Could I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. In moving this item, I would like to make a number of comments because the times we are living in are the most challenging and confronting times that we have ever experienced. And each day we await with great concern to find out the numbers of people affected by the pandemic, but also to find out what are the new measures that either government or council directly can provide by way of support to our residents, to our frontline workers, to support agencies and those individuals and organisations directly affected by COVID-19. As the acting CEO indicated in his report, the impacts on our community and business and on our staff are widespread and significant. And he made reference to unemployment rates, job losses, personal impacts on residents, on businesses and on services. And he made reference to the collective emotional turmoil. I wanted to express my heartfelt thanks to all of you for your commitment, patience and courage. To everyone staying home, getting tested if they're exhibiting symptoms, and of course wearing masks to prevent further infection. Thank you to all of our council staff for continuing to provide services to our communities. Thank you also to the many frontline workers, including staff in aged care facilities, doctors and nurses, hospitals, community health services, and of course emergency services for your invaluable and selfless efforts. But also a big thank you to our teachers and other staff providing essential services. I certainly understand the anguish felt by everyone and want to reassure you that we will certainly provide whatever support we can. We must all remain strong and optimistic and support one another. Together, we will beat this pandemic. Would the seconder like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to concur with your comments and to say that we as the council will stand by our community through this pandemic to try and help however we can with our services and support for all in the community and for our staff as well. And you're right, we will get through this, but we stand with you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. I'll now put that motion to a vote. All those in favour? Motion unanimously carried. Thank you. Administrator through the reports in the notice paper. Item 6.3.1, 2017-102, provision of grading services, a contract extension report. Do I have a mover?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Administrator Duncan. Are there any questions? Administrator
Chair, may
Bilson.
I ask a question? Thank you. Through you, Chair, through the Acting Chief Executive Officer, may I firstly acknowledge Mr. Harry's work last week in really doing a great job of the community consultations on Masons Road. So please convey our appreciation to him and the team. My question though relates to the scope of works under this contract. With the population pressures, the enormous demands on our roads and our unmade roads in the north of the municipality, does this contract reflect those pressures? I'd appreciate some insights on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. And for that, I will ask actually Mr. Harries, the Director of City Presentation and Transport, to address the question. Thank you. Looking.
Thank you, Acting CEO, and thank you for the question, Administrator Wilson, and through you, Chair. Yes, this contract does go a way of addressing those outcomes for the community. We've got approximately 80 kilometres of unsealed roads across our network, and this service goes towards grading the unsealed roads and ensuring they're safe and usable and accessible for all residents living in those areas. So the specific scopes of this contract ensures that there's program grading of these unsealed roads across our rural areas, and also programmed grading of the unsealed roads found on our urban fringe, and that's increasing with high vehicle volumes due to our growth. So this service goes towards maintaining a safe and usable road surface for those residents and also other community members that might need to use those roads. It also goes towards reactive reinstatements of these roads when there's an emergency event, flooding and washing out of the roads. So this contract goes towards servicing and maintaining or bringing back to the appropriate standard the community expects the roads in these areas. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions, Administrator Wilson or Duncan? Do the mover or seconder wish to speak to this item?
No, Chair.
So I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6.5.1, Assemblies of Administrators to the 4th of August 2020. I would like to move this item. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. Are there any questions on this report?
No, Chair.
No. In moving this item, I simply wanted to indicate that the purpose of the report is to ensure transparency in relation to meetings which include an administrator or administrators and staff members of advisory committees where an administrator is present and where matters may actually involve a council decision or exercise of council delegation. So that is the purpose of the report. Does the seconder wish to speak?
No, Chair.
I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? Motion was carried. Item 6.5.2, Administrator Expenses and Reimbursement Policy. Again, I would like to move this item from the Chair. Do I have a seconder? Administrator Wilson, thank you. Are there any questions?
No,
No.
Chair.
So in moving this item, I'd just like to highlight that this new policy for administrator expenses and reimbursement is obviously based on the previous councillor expenses policy. However, there are a number of key amendments that collectively aim to ensure clarity and full accountability in relation to any expense incurred by an administrator, and obviously to ensure rigour in public reporting. I'd just like to highlight a few of the key amendments to the policy. Firstly, it merges 3 previous documents, including a policy document, a general guidelines document, and an IT guidelines document. And the aim of that is really to minimise duplication and for ease of use. There's a requirement that all expenses incurred by administrators are now reported, not just those required by legislation, and that's obviously to ensure full transparency. There's an expansion of the definition of dependent care to include not only children, but also frail older people and people with a disability. There's a requirement that administrators must maintain a comprehensive logbook and provide a copy of this when claiming for mileage travelled. The new policy incorporates stricter requirements when reporting of administrator expenses where an administrator cancels their attendance at an event or training and the cost of this is non-refundable. There's the inclusion of the relevant provisions from the state government reimbursement policy and domestic travel policy, which apply to the administrators. And finally, there's specific exclusion, my apologies, for any payment of costs associated with the attendance of an administrator's partner at a council-related event or function. Does the seconder wish to speak to this item?
Just to yes, I may, Chair, just to reinforce and support your remarks. I'm very pleased about the transparency that's been incorporated in this measure. Some of the tighter controls over a legitimate use of taxpayer funding, including the spousal expenses, and certainly concur with your remarks and commend this policy.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is unanimous. Thank you. Item 6.5.3, Privacy and Data Protection Policy Review. Do I have a mover?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Administrator Duncan. Are there any questions? There being no questions.
Sorry, you're right, Chair.
There being no questions, would the mover like to speak to this item?
Just very briefly, if I may, Chair, thank you to the council officers for bringing this policy forward. It was an early priority for all councils, and we are updating the previous City of Whittlesea policy. Important to note, there is a guidance provided across local government, and we've very much adhered to those arrangements. And it also includes a mechanism for citizens and clients of the City of Whittlesea to be able to seek information to make sure it's accurate and to have that corrected if they find any error. So a very positive step forward and a support for active citizenry, Chair, and commend the policy to you.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. Does the seconder wish to speak to this item?
No, thank you, Chair.
I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is unanimously carried. Item 6.5.4, review of council delegations to the CEO and members of council staff. And I would like to move this item from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to second it, but I would like to propose a slight amendment, if I may, Chair.
Please
Thank you.
Go ahead, Administrator Bilson.
It relates to the planning delegation section of it, and really inspired by good practice that we've seen in our meetings to date, where important matters should become visible and be made aware to the council, and our deliberation and decision making made very clear to the public as well. So I'm speaking in relation to planning applications where there is a potential significant public interest. It might not manifest itself, that interest might not manifest itself as objections, but it's certainly something that is of considerable interest and something that I think it's appropriate for the council itself to concern itself with and to determine the matter. And the other one is where, and we saw the example last council meeting in Epping, where under the town centre strategy, the look and feel of the town centre is foreshadowed as changing to be a multi-user, higher density precinct. And we considered an application about carrying forward that vision. That's the kind of things, Madam Chair and Administrator Duncan, I think the public would expect that we hold up and highlight as a time of change and transition. And that's something that I think should come back to council and be a limitation on the delegations that we're proposing to give to the council officers. So I have hopefully on the screen, you'll see us encapsulate those changes. I'm happy to talk to them further if that's helpful. Otherwise, very happy to support the motion with that inclusion, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson, and I'm happy for that inclusion to be contained within the motion because it obviously strengthens and further clarifies planning delegations. Are there any questions? So there being no questions, in moving this item, obviously with the amendment that has been proposed by Administrator Bilson, I'd just make a couple of comments to note. Firstly, that the CEO delegations were last reviewed in May of this year, when the financial delegations to the CEO were increased based on benchmarking data that had been obtained. A full review of both of the delegations occurred in August 2019. But also importantly, there are a number of provisions of the new Local Government Act 2020, which must be expressly incorporated into the instrument of delegations. And they include such things as a number of matters relating to the employment arrangements of the CEO, adopting or amending the governance rules of the council and any local law, approval of the budget, and the power to borrow money. So they're important new provisions within the new Local Government Act 2020. Does the seconder wish to speak to this item?
Chair, only just to draw the audience's attention to page 124 is the areas that we're talking about changing, and that's section 61(1) delegation under the Planning and Environment Act, and also under section 84(1) of the Planning and Environment Act, which I think those with an interest will be able to identify on page 128 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson, for the further clarification. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion's carried. I note that there are no notices of motion. So if we could move on to reports from delegates. Administrator Duncan.
Nothing to report this month, Chair.
Administrator Bilson.
Chair, thank you. Two items to report. The first, in my role as a delegate to the Yarra Plenty Regional Library, we had an update meeting on the 8th of July, fellow panellist, and that was a briefing on the impact of an upgrade in COVID restrictions and what the prospects were for the phase 4 that we're now in terms of library services, mobile services, and outreach vehicle operations. And might I take this opportunity to encourage our community to make use of the click and post services, the home delivery services, Chair, that are available through the Regional Library Service, keeping that important service functioning under these challenging environments. The second item was the Whittlesea Disability Network on the 14th of July. Very grateful for the guidance of council officers. It was chaired extremely well by Stephen Bell on a Microsoft Teams call, and the council community wellbeing team were very involved. About things that are being done to sustain wellness and the selfless support of carers who give so much to others. Finally, there was a proposition around advancing the city's good reputation around accessible buildings. That came to us via Ivan. Some work going on in the Australian Building Code Board, mandating certain access requirements, and council officers are making further inquiries about that. And I commend my report to you, Madam Chair, and Administrator Duncan.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. And I would also like to make a short report. I attended an important meeting of Whittlesea Community Connections on the 20th of July, and some very comprehensive updates were also provided at that meeting in relation to housing and homelessness, a number of governance issues, but a standard item on the agenda of that particular forum is always also an update on COVID-19 and community impacts. On the 22nd of July, I had a meeting of the interface group of councils, which was really preparatory pre-briefing for a series of scheduled sessions with members of Parliament in relation to our advocacy campaign, which was very worthwhile. I had a further meeting of Whittlesea Community Connections on the 29th of July as part of a subcommittee for the CEO performance review. And while perhaps not being a formal advisory committee or a delegate report, I did just want to note that I actively participated in 4 of the sessions with the Minister for Local Government and senior departmental staff from a multiplicity of relevant departments, where they were providing comprehensive updates to councils in relation to state government response and on the COVID-19 issue, very important for representation for our municipality. Administrators, I require a motion to note the delegates' reports. Do I have a mover?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Administrator Bilson. All those in favour? That motion is carried. There being no further business, I now declare this meeting closed.
Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you.
Thank you, Chair.